Redline Logbook here for D. Gray Man's Search for Alan Walker Arc, Part 2. And we're actually starting off not where we left off, but a few minutes earlier. Tin Campy revealed everything that has happened up to this point, and Nia is pissed because Cross is dead, and apparently Cross was his last lifeline he had in this situation, which means he's now on his own surrounded by enemies. On top of that, for some reason, Alan doesn't remember who Nia is. His memories have been erased. And what's even weirder is that Alan doesn't just not remember Nia. The fact is he's gotten younger. It's as if his entire body reverted back to being a kid and he had to grow up all over again. Then he looks at his hand and he realizes that he has innocence, which means Alan must have did something to connect himself with innocence. And that really pisses him off. So Nia then decides, okay, fine. If that's how this is going to be, then I will let Alan just do as he does, and I'll live through his eyes, and I'll slowly feed him information, force him to dream more and more of his past memories, and eventually I will take over his body. And this is basically the strategy that Nia has come up with in this situation where he's basically out of options. He then tells Tin Campy not to tell anyone, and the two of them are gonna go on this journey together. And that is when we catch up to the present, where Kanda bursts into the room and puts a sword to Nia's throat. Nia then hands control back over to Alan, who then starts freaking out why Kanda is putting a sword to his throat. Kanda then starts yelling at Alan, asking him if he's the 14th. Alan's like, no, I'm not. What are you doing? And he says, if that's not true, then what happened there? Pointing over to Johnny. Kanda then rushes over him, tries to start pumping his blood into his wound to heal him, like he did to Mary. The problem is, because Kanda is at the end of his life, the healing process isn't as potent. But Johnny heals enough that he is going to make it. Alan, of course, is starting to freak out because he almost murdered Johnny. Johnny, on the other hand, actually begins to get his mind set. He starts to remember what happened, and then he goes, that wasn't Alan. He then looks at Alan, who is on the verge of tears. He tries to go over to him to basically say, it's fine, I'm okay, it's not your fault, but Alan just wants Johnny to stay away. He wants everyone to stay away from him because he doesn't want to hurt anyone. Kanda then begins to mock Alan, saying that, what, you're just going to run away again? Alan forced defends himself, saying, I'm not running away. I'm doing my job as exorcist. This is just the most efficient way I can do it. Obviously, just coping as best as he can. As Alan begins to spiral further and further into despair, Kanda believes Alan has already given up and figures it's hopeless at this point. But Johnny, on the other hand, looks into Alan's eyes and said, you still haven't given up, have you? I can still see it inside of you. You're fighting with everything you have, which is why, as your friend, I will not leave you. This proud declaration by Johnny impresses Kanda and embarrasses Alan to the point where he actually loses focus for a second, and that's when both Johnny and Kanda then jump Alan and tie him up. The way they get Alan to stay with the two of them is they force him to wear a handcuff that's also hooked up to Johnny's. Instead of being chained together, it sets off a signal if you're too far apart, and both parties get electrocuted. But this doesn't change the fact that they're all still broke because, well, they got robbed. And so, Johnny sets up a small business where he fixes gadgets and such. One of the customers has a copy machine that needs to be fixed. Thing is too big to move to where Johnny's at, so he asks Johnny and Alan to go with him and fix it at his office. They agree. Kanda decides to stay behind. He says he'll watch over the rest of the gadgets while those two are off fixing the copy machine. But in truth, his arm is actually beginning to hurt, and when he looks at it, it's covered in veins sprouting from the cross where the innocence came from. The reason for this is because he's starting to become a fallen. For some reason, Tin Campy also decided to stay behind, and Kanda's only response to that is that he doesn't trust Tin Campy. He's suspicious that he's working for the 14th, and he questions if he even actually likes Alan to begin with, or he even cares about him. Tin Campy then starts to cry, which makes Kanda question, okay, so you do care about Alan, or are you upset that I'm suspicious of you? It's really confusing. He doesn't really understand what Tin Campy's feeling at this moment. Point is, he can't be trusted is basically Kanda's decision. That's when Apocrypha shows up and he starts to examine all of the little gadgets that are surrounding Kanda. And he asks him, oh, are you selling these things? And Kanda's like, no, we're a repair shop. None of these things are for sale. They're being fixed. And Apocrypha's like, oh, that's a shame. That's too bad. He then looks at Tin Campy, and at that very second, Tin Campy becomes a giant again and crushes Apocrypha. Kanda's only response is, what the hell are you doing? You just killed a priest. But then, Apocrypha activates his innocence, well, he is innocence, and he starts to shred apart Tin Campy, who then goes flying. Kanda then immediately realizes that this is a threat. He activates his innocence, and he gets into a duel with Apocrypha. Apocrypha then bodies Kanda, does that thing where he creates feathers on your eyes and starts to erase your memory, and he orders Kanda to return to the Order, because he doesn't want to turn into a fallen. He then says Alan is a good boy because he didn't tell anyone about him. Seriously, Apocrypha is creepy as all hell. and he starts to move in on Tin Campy. Tin Campy then starts to make his move, but Apocrypha tells him, eventually I'm going to assimilate Alan, but I will make a deal with you. I will ignore him today. In exchange, you don't move from that spot. Tim, realizing the position that he's in, decides to sit still. Apocrypha says, the way you were made, you're basically indestructible. No matter how many times I slice you up or dice you, crush you, it'll just regenerate. But there is one way to kill you. And he pulls this piece of wood out of his mouth, and it's really gross the way he does it. And he shows Tim Campy, and then Tim Campy realizes he's going to die. So then he slaps Khanda's golem, turning it back on. And that's when the Order starts to communicate through the golem, saying, Khanda, where have you been? What is going on? Yada, yada, yada. And Apocrypha is like, oh, so you thought if people were coming, I would back down. That's not happening. Then Khanda, who apparently still has the ability to move, somehow wraps himself around Apocrypha's head and then snaps his neck with his legs before finally passing out. The thing is, Apocrypha can't be killed that way. You can break his neck all you want. He's made of innocence. He is innocence. That isn't going to work. And so he just gets back up and, stabs Tin Campy with that piece of wood. Tin Campy then turns black and starts to break apart. As Tin Campy is dying, Apocrypha then says, well, since you technically did keep your promise by staying still, I will not go after Alan today. Also, we learned that Apocrypha has the ability to read the memories of other people's innocence. In this case, he read the memory of Mugen from Khanda. And what he learned is that Link is alive. Now, a crow abandoning his mission is, of course, a complete and utter crime that cannot be forgiven by the church. And so Apocrypha realizes, okay, this is Cromwell. And Apocrypha does not like Cromwell. Speaking of Link, obviously he's been watching this entire time, and he is completely filled with fear and disturbance by Apocrypha's presence, just watching him devastate Khanda and Tim Campy, and he realizes just how fucked of a situation they're in because he recognizes him as one of the cardinals from the meeting from Central. And so Link is now wondering, wait, there's a monster at the center of Central? Also, what does Cromwell know about this? Is this why he was sent to be a partner of the 14th? He completely doesn't understand what's going on at all. Apocrypha then grows some wings and then erases the memories of all of the civilians in the area. And after he's done doing that, an Iron Maiden appears underneath him and attacks. As it tries to crush him to death, he just shatters it to pieces like it was nothing. But Joss Davy then blows his head off. And while he is currently trying to regenerate his head, another one of their creations appears and then swallows him whole. Yes, the Noah have successfully captured Apocrypha. All they had to do is do a good old-fashioned sneak attack. After time begins to pass, people's memories get rearranged to the point where they don't remember what happened. The street starts to walk as if nothing even occurred. That is when the Order begins to show up. A bunch of finders currently following the signal coming from Khanda's golem, where they found him half in a daze. At that moment, Khanda sees the Order has found him. He's like, ah, damn. And then he goes, wait, no. I brought Johnny to Alan, and the two of us then decided it was best that I go back to the Order so I don't turn into a Fallen. So yeah, the memories that were implanted by Apocrypha was basically, he fulfilled his mission, now he can just go home. Along with the finders is actually General Jefferson. He apparently found Khanda's Mugen and gives it back to him. And at that moment, when Khanda thinks that he's fulfilled his mission to help Alan, his tattoo on his chest begins to pulsate because it is trying to heal his erased memories. Khanda starts to convulse as two separate sets of memories begin to pile into one another. He's trying to make sense of it. Jefferson obviously is freaking out because Khanda is his old student. And eventually, Khanda is able to put two and two together because he realizes this pain. He realizes this feeling because this is the exact same thing that happened to him over and over again when he tried to unite with his innocence back in the lab during the second Exodus project. And he comes to the realization that that cardinal is innocence. He wasn't using innocence, he is innocence. With his real memories back, he then looks at Tin Campy, realizes that's him. He scoops him up, he pulls out the wood chip, but Tin Campy isn't regenerating. He is, in fact, dead. Khanda then threatens General Jefferson, basically saying that he should not get in his way. He tries to drag him back to the Order, and Jefferson's response is just a laugh. He has no interest in actually dragging Khanda back to the Order. That was his order, sure, but he only agreed to go along on this mission because he cared about Khanda and he wanted to make sure he was safe. And so he's actually just willing to help him out. But Khanda has to make a deal. Jefferson will help if Khanda decides to become a general. Khanda obviously is taken aback by this because he should be the last person to be a general. He hates the Order. But Jefferson's response is, well, you must still have determination inside of you, though. Otherwise, you wouldn't return to the place that you hate. And the way Jefferson sees it, that's good enough. Khanda then thinks about it for a second, realizing that, yeah, he hates the Order, but he does have a mission he needs to take care of. he does have unfinished business to deal with. And so he begrudgingly goes along with Jefferson's proposal. Now, while all this is happening, that is when Alan's innocence starts acting up. He immediately realizes that Apocrypha is nearby, and so he tries to then run to get Tin Can Pete to escape and get away from Johnny and everyone else so they don't get hurt. Unfortunately, he ends up running into the Earl. The Earl immediately attacked Alan and starts going on a deranged fit. Even Alan notices that he's acting more crazy than normal. He keeps screaming Nia over and over again as he's attacking Alan, trying to catch him. Eventually, he smashes Alan through a wall next to Johnny. Johnny picks up Alan, tries to get him out of there, but the Earl then starts to hallucinate the image of Nia dying with someone else trying to protect him, most likely Mana. The Earl then gets extremely pissed off, saying, "Who the hell are you?" and then attacks Johnny. This frantic act then leads to both Alan and the Millennium Earl's minds being collided into one another, and Alan gets visions of the past. The first vision is Rhodes holding onto the body of Nia, while the Millennium Earl is standing above them, with Bookman in the background watching everything, because that's his job as Bookman. And the second vision is of that old house and tree that Nia was dreaming about earlier, where the Millennium Earl looks at Mana and says, "This is all your fault. You did this." Alan's able to rip away his mind from the Millennium Earls, and that's when the Earl says, "I remember now, this is all Mana's fault." While this is happening, Wisely is currently searching with his evil eye to find Rhodes. She's able to manifest a very small version of herself that only he can see because of his third eye, and he begins to ask her what happened 35 years ago. Who is Nia, the 14th, that tried to kill the Millennium Earl? And at that moment, his Noah genes then start to activate, and they basically start to scream, "I will not forgive him, I will not forgive him." Basically, he's slowly being consumed through his hatred of Nia. Wisely is able to push it back and calm himself down, but it's clear the grudge against the 14th is on nearly the same level as their grudge against Innocence. Rhodes then says Nia is scary because he's not like the other Noah. He's different from the rest of them. She then informs him that if Nia does kill the Millennium Earl, there will be nothing that stops the heart from killing the rest of the Noah. He then tries to get more answers out of her, but before that can happen, he's woken up out of his psychic moment with Rhodes by Tiki Meek, who is demanding to know where the Millennium Earl is. And when Wisely looks to his side, says he's right here, he realizes, shit, he's gone. We go back over to where Alan and the Earl are at. The Earl is still screaming about how Mana destroyed everything, that he's the one who caused the tragedy of 35 years ago, and Alan has been consumed by the 14th again. So Nia is back in control, and he notices that his arm goes back to normal, which means Apocrypha has gone away somewhere. He doesn't know where, but he doesn't really care as long as he doesn't have to deal with that monster. Nia then calls out to the Millennium Earl, and at this moment, the Earl is happier than he's ever been. He jumps out of his clown suit into his real form, and he jumps onto Nia and hugs him. He remembers how Nia tried to kill him, how he ended up being the one to kill Nia, and he sees the image of him standing over his dead brother as Mana is holding and caressing his corpse. And he straight up says that he hates the Nia that belongs to Mana. And you see Nia's hands slowly go around the Millennium Earl. He's about to kill him, but before Nia is able to kill the Millennium Earl, he says he wants him to disappear. He has a mission to fulfill, but at the same time, he wants him to be by his side forever. And hearing that, Nia stops his attempt to kill the Earl and hugs him back. And for a few seconds, the two generally just embrace each other as brothers. Nia then asks the Earl, "What happened to your face? Did you change it after you remembered me?" The Earl then gets confused and says, "I always had this face." And Nia then laughs and says, "Oh, I see. So you've lost both your face and your memories." And he tells him, "Do you know why you want to be with me so much? Why we feel so connected to one another?" And the Earl continues to look confused at Nia. And so Nia then explains the truth of who they really are. For 7,000 years, the Millennium Earl lived, until one day he saw the most beautiful view he ever did. On that tree seemed the golden field. And at that moment, for the first time ever, the Millennium Earl disappeared. His being split into two entities. Both turned into infants, and then were adopted by Katarina Campbell. She named one Nia D. Campbell, and the other Mana D. Campbell. And both of those children then grew up to become Nia and Mana, until one day the two betrayed each other, and Mana killed Nia. And Mana became the new Millennium Earl. Hearing this, the memories that the Millennium Earl has stuffed down long ago starts to resurface. He then remembers slightly. After he devoured Nia, he basically went insane and started screaming at a mirror, claiming that he wasn't the one who ate Nia. No. It was Mana's fault. It was all Mana's fault. And he basically developed a split personality at this point where he blames everything on Mana, and Mana's begging the Millennium Earl to stop. This is not okay. And eventually, in a sense, the Millennium Earl kills Mana at that moment, trying to rid himself of all the guilt of murdering his own brother and devouring his soul, causing him to go completely mad, where the Millennium Earl decides he needs to erase Mana completely, and so he decides to blow off his own head, and then reconstructed a new one looking like the way he does now, so he never has to see the face of Mana ever again. As these two brothers are having their reunion, and the Earl is beginning to go insane again, the Order is currently still running around looking for Alan. Link decides to help out by knocking a few of them out, but he's still extremely shooken up. And anytime he thinks about Apocalyphus, his entire chest begins to tighten up and he begins to shake. Obviously, you would fear the one who murdered you, but since his memories were erased by the one who murdered him, he doesn't know why. He's so scared of this fake cardinal. He then starts to feel conflicted, because as he begins to think about it, he then realizes that he genuinely cares about Alan, and he wants him to overcome his fate. But at the same time, he's loyal to McCullen, and he has to fulfill his mission to become an ally of the 14th. And so this contradiction begins to tear him up inside. Back with Nia and the Earl then starts to freak out, asking Nia why he keeps calling him Mana. And Nia says, because you are Mana. You're my Mana. And once more, the Earl's psyche begins to shatter, and he screams, I am not Mana. Once again, trying to repress the past and everything that he did. And I think that is a good place to stop. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, give it a thumbs up so you can enjoy more D. Gray Man and other anime things. Thank you, and have a great day.